This is the face of Kenya's resilience. The streets are alive, not with anger alone, but with purpose. Look closer. This is not chaos. This is community. It's the determined voices of a generation saying, enough! It's a movement united by one belief that the future belongs to the people, not the corrupt, not the complacent. Banners wave boldly carrying a message impossible to ignore. The devil wears kaunda, zakayo, shuka, reject, not amend. These words are not just slogans, they are the battle cries of a people tired of watching opportunities squandered by greed. Through the streets of Nairobi and beyond, they march. Students, workers, mothers, fathers, each step challenging the systems that have long failed them. Their signs don't just speak of protest, they speak of a demand for accountability, for justice, and for dignity. But these streets, crowded with the voices of hope, are more than a protest. They are a mirror held up to Kenya's soul, reflecting the courage of a nation ready to rebuild itself from the ground up. The world is watching, but Kenya's people are leading. This is not about a single movement or a fleeting moment in time. It's a collective cry for a future where leaders are accountable, where youth are empowered, and where the foundations of governance rest not on corruption, but on integrity and accountability. This is a story. The story of the city.
Wewe Rubina, no matter what. No matter what. Wewe Rubina. Tumetenga.
What up, y'all? Welcome back to the Open Exchange. I'm your host, Tech Swambui. And today, I'm just going to explore ideas and actions shaping our world today. Today, we're going to focus on Africa, a continent brimming with opportunities, yet facing critical challenges that require bold action and innovative solutions. From governance and inclusion to the challenges of attracting investment, this conversation today will explore how Africa can overcome these hurdles. We're not experts in this, but we're striving to become scholars and people who can provide our insights in terms of what we're seeing. So, hey, don't judge us. If we're wrong somewhere, go fact check us in a comment. We're going to explore and kind of discuss how to overcome these hurdles and thrive on the global stage. Today, I'm joined back again with Hussein Wayaki, who was here last and had a very good conversation on the aspect of fighting for environmental justice. Hussein is a visionary leader with deep insights into Africa's development, specifically Kenya's landscape. Hussein, it's an honor to have you here. Let's start with this. What do you see as Africa's greatest untapped potential?
I think even statistically in terms of availability of raw material for production, Africa is top the list. So It's not a question of what we have and what we don't have, because we probably have almost everything in terms of tapping into the potential that we have. It's the question of how willing are we to tap into those potentials.
Okay. So let's kind of get into our first segment that we discussed. We're going to talk about. We'll talk about governance, security, and development. Governance, security, and development are kind of, I think, central to Africa's future, right? And there's a recently published book, actually, a recent published volume. Shout out to my Professor Dr. Oyurende, who's now the interim dean of education at Clark Atlanta University. And in the issue of governance, security, and development in contemporary Africa, he actually wrote in there as well. He's actually written a lot of work specifically geared to West Africa and Nigeria as well. But in this volume, it highlights the importance of decolonizing governance and building systems that align with Africa's realities. So, Hussein, in your view, what does effective governance look like for Africa in this context? And how can countries balance external influences while safeguarding their sovereignty?
Well, I think, and I pretty much agree with that, and as much as I haven't read the work, I think the first solution towards African achieving what it ought to achieve is colonizing. It's embracing ideologies that are in favor of Africans themselves, because right now, if you check through from South African to North African Egypt, you realize we have policies that clearly don't work for us. So the first step towards achieving, and allow me to say this, when Mr. Ruto, President Ruto came into office, he was very vibrant about pushing the African ideologies. You know, I remember him.
But wasn't he that guy he ran on a campaign on the hustler's mentality, huh?
Yes, apparently he swayed the emotions of the dynasties versus hustlers, and he got amassed a lot of sympathies and empathies from the quote unquote poor, which apparently doesn't belong to that class. But immediately he ascended to power. He was very vibrant in terms of pushing the Africanicity and the Pan-African ideology. And I remember him running a global campaign of de-dollarization and having an a common African currency that will, put Africa in the global market arena. And I remember at one point, Dr. Malema calling him out, and he was like, I don't understand this guy anymore, because when he came into office, he was saying this narrative. But right now, it seems like he has taken a completely different direction. So, yes, in terms of policies, it's not even a question of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa. I think Africa as a continent at large needs to come up with policies that are good, that are working for Africans. We need to abandon these Western policies, because, Western policies that have been proven to work for Westerners don't necessarily work for us, and they have proved not to be working for us. We really need to sit down with ourselves and develop policies, economic policies, social policies, political policies, that work for Africans. And that at least will have started or apparently will be tapping into the untapped potential that Africa has.
Yeah, and it's funny, referencing to Ruto, he ran a good campaign, he was able to win. Is he fulfilling though on his promises? I don't know. But going back to your point on effective governance, I think effective governance in Africa must prioritize the basic needs of its citizens, including access to simple things like food, education, health, and shelter. And I think those are some vital aspects to consider in the actual governance of a country. When it comes to the Western kind of ideology, for me, there's some things I definitely do agree with when it comes to the Western ideology, and they have proven to work over time. But one thing I don't really agree with is too much about foreign aid. I don't think foreign aid is something that African continents should rely on because it doesn't really allow them to become self-sufficient. It makes them kind of continue having the aspect of the dependency theory, to continue depending on other people to come help them out. So how can African governments ensure that these needs are met while also addressing the militaristic and state-centric interests that have historically dominated like security governance.
Yeah, you see, Tex, just to get us a little back, you said that you apparently agree to a number of Western policies that have been proven to work, huh? But do they really work for Africa? That's the question, because what works
I
for
mean, yeah, some
certainly
have
work.
worked.
And yes, if something have been tested and it looks like it works for us, then why not? You see, we're living in a global village apparently, where we live in so much interrelations and intercorrelations amongst countries and continents. What has been developed in the West and has been proven to work for Africans, we can adopt that. But I feel like we have adopted a number of things that don't really work. Like, let's talk about the question of the Africans borrowing, like we just said. See, most of those policies are not even developed for Africans, and they don't even. It's like it looks like, and I'm sorry to say this, but they're developed in the sense of the big brother syndrome mentality. Because we have the state, we have the larger GDP in terms of economic growth. We have this, we have that. We are coming to tell you what to do rather than coming to ask for what needs to be done for us to, progress together. So I feel like what has been developed in the West and has been proven to work for Africans, so be it. But a number of policies developed in the West don't really work for Africans.
I agree. There's definitely some things that have not worked. But I'll bring up this example. Let's talk about like something like electricity, right? Access to electricity is something that Africa has always struggled with in some areas. And it's not that electricity is kind of the benchmark of the end all be all, but for a region such as Kenya that is so innovative and it's becoming something that is a tech hub, why is the agenda focused so much on the technological innovation when you're not addressing the key aspect factor, which is people cannot access technology if they don't have access to electricity, right? And something I would definitely agree to that maybe you might disagree with, and a lot of people might disagree with me, but I would agree that the Western model of how to implement infrastructure in the system of ensuring that people have access to electricity works, right? Things like the Power Africa. Obama was the president of the United States. He did that with the USAID, and he was implementing that, and it showed immense growth in terms of. I'll specify with Kenya because I did research on this. It grew immensely, and you remember when I was doing that research paper on this, it grew immensely on from like I think 2013 to 2023. It went from 10% to 82%, and it's not saying that there wasn't the country itself did not play a role in that factor, but it used a Western model of implementing that, right? But how do we ensure we can implement that model in our own way that is not making us reliant too much on foreign investment?
Well, I actually agree with you when it comes to the Western policies in infrastructural development. They really work because, yeah, it has worked for them. So it's not even a matter of, the West telling us what to do. It's a matter of us going there, benchmarking, copying, and paste in our continent. But it is the problem with Africa and apparently my country, Kenya, because we achieved so much in a very little time in terms of electrification. Between 2013 and 2022, we had moved from, I think, 13% to 82%. That's magnificent. Even if it were exam, that's an A plus, not even an A. So now with that, you realize it's not about the potential or the ability or capability of Africa continent to, do the job. It lies in the question of the goodwill to do the job. As then, I think it was one of the former President Emeritus Uhuru Kenyatta's legacy to just do 100% electrification, especially in the rural areas. He didn't achieve 100%, but he really did the job. So when it comes to infrastructural development policy, I agree with the West. But here again is the question: do we need the West to come and tell us you need to do this and this and this in terms of infrastructural development? Whereas we see, like, we can come to California, we can go to Texas, we can go to the UK, benchmark, learn from them. We have resources, if you've been following around right now in Kenya, in my country, Kenya, and the rise of the Gen Z movement, you realize we have unleashed so many told projects with approved budget and dispersed finances. So that poses the question: where did the money go? Because it's not a question of us having the ability to do the infrastructure. We've already had the budgets, this was with the funds, so where is the money? So pretty much brings us to the question of, the goodwill in governance and leadership as to who we really bring this office.
Yeah, that's a good point that you mentioned that, and that's kind of where I wanted to lead to in terms of the funding is there, but where is the funding going, right? And I would say I would highly my assumption and what I think is actually true is that corruption. People are pocketing this money and they're using it for their own expense, and it's not going back to the citizens. And I think the absence of basic needs and social services has heightened these sectarian uprisings and various acts of protests and violence. So how can a government like Kenya refocus their security strategies to include human security as well and kind of address these underlying issues that are going on?
Well, I think the Kenyan government, and apparently not the Kenyan government, but Kenya as a country, it needs a whole systematic regimental change. We need to change the whole, and I really appreciate the rise of the Gen Z, and I hope that this will go forth. And when the 2027 general election comes in, I really, really hope that we'll go into the same spirit into the 2027 general election, and revolutionize the whole system. Because my country, Kenya, the problem is not resources, the problem is not finance, the problem is stealing. These guys, it's not even corruption. Corruption is an understatement. These guys are looters on an industrial scale. Professor Lumumba said that, and I really reason. These guys, it's not even, you see, corruption couldn't be globally because corruption has some aspects like, the culture of nepotism, the culture of kickback and whatnot. But you see, even in those countries, some things are proven to work. But in Kenya, nothing is working because these people are stealing to the core. Imagine a road allocated 80 billions, that whole money is dispersed maybe in the fiscal year 2013, 2014. There's no single thing that is done there. That money, if you check with the control of budget, it's money approved, disbursed, and even paid to the contractor, but nothing has been done ever since. And you ask the question, where is the money? Who is the contractor? In the long run, you hear people buying estates in Dubai and Qatar and the UAE, and you wonder, I mean, sincerely. So you can't really call that corruption because corruption has some discipline. In my country, we need a complete regimental change. In fact, it might look, extremist from, where it might look prima facie, but I feel like we really need a revolution in my.
We'll get to that segment when we talk about the aspect of youth inclusion. But before we get to that, let's kind of address something that, it has some history and it has some pertinence to maybe Kenya, but with like rising concerns of, maybe I'm saying this because I have the perspective of maybe as an American, but rising concerns over things like terrorism, drug trafficking, and climate change. How do you think African governments can address these security challenges without compromising development priorities? For instance, how can they balance the need for military responses with the necessity of addressing the root cause of these issues, such as poverty and the lack of opportunities? And kind of something that I actually believe that before you answer this question is, I think that the African continent itself should have one unified military, one unified navy, because I think that if we can all have a unified Navy, we're able to protect our international borders. Even though we have international borders within the actual geographical landscape, but if we can able to develop a Navy that is able to establish and protect the whole continent itself, think somebody I read this from somewhere. I can't recall exactly where, but with when you have a strong military, especially a Navy, it means you have the ability to protect your waters and your lands. Before people can get to your lands, you're protecting your waters. But going back to you, in terms of how do you think the African governments can address these security challenges without compromising development priorities?
You see, the problem of Africa actually lies on the leaders that we elect to power. That is the biggest problem of Africa, and that's where we start now addressing the problem. I really doubt Africa should be crying of hunger or things like food security or climate change or whatnot. Those are things. Those should be things of a past if at all they had to exist. But I feel like they shouldn't have existed in Africa in the first place. So the biggest problem in Africa lies on the leader that we put to power, lies on the leaders that we elect to office. Starting from my own country, they elected this guy. People had a lot of hope on him, but just 1 year, 2 year down the line, everybody's tired. Why? I don't know, but I feel like Africa at large could address the whole aspect of good governance. Then it will have solved, if not 100%, then at least 60% of its problem. Or solving 60% of its problem, that means you have already sorted the aspect of basic needs: food, shelter, clothing, and education. Now, coming to that aspect of security, and also as you specified it from the aspect of Africa having one army, you've already sorted 60% of your basic problems. Then now you can address the bigger problems that you have. Now we can go into those discussion of as a continent, why don't we figure out having one currency to stabilize the whole continent? Because the moment we have one currency, we're talking of a unified economic structure. Talking of a unified economic structure, we get a higher stake in terms of the global bargain in the economic sector. You do that, you elevate economically. Talking of having a unified navy, you have a unified navy, that means you're well protected from the seas to the land. You're well protected from the seas to the land. That means the enemy has to use much more energy to figure out as to how to attack you, not just physically, but also idealistically and ideologically. So Africa needs to first address the issue of leadership and government. That what bears and goes the whole problem. And apparently is what will solve that way. That's where the solution is there. That's what is going to solve a lot of African problems, starting from my own country, Kenya. Because in Kenya, we don't have we have good leaders, and we have good politicians apparently who can sway emotions. When it comes to leadership and governance, it's not even zero, it's a negative.
Yeah, that's funny. It's not even zero; it's negative. Yeah, it's something that raises question of maybe they should take a leadership management class if they have to. But it's something that also that I think is very important to consider is the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's aimed to enhance like regional cooperation and economic integration, and I think this continental free trade thing can foster economic growth and stability, which are, I think, very crucial for Africa's security itself. However, it does require strong governance structures to ensure that the benefits are equitably distributed and that the process is transparent and accountable. And as you said, I think that's now where the aspect of transparency and accountability is on the leaders. The leaders are not transparent and they're not accountable, which causes this conflict of not being able to actually unify one as a continent, and then as well as your own country, you're not able to unify. Of course, there's different examples of how different countries have been able to grow and prosper. Of course, Kenya has definitely been a pivotal aspect within the East African region on trade as well and on technological innovation, as well as Rwanda. has shown great progress in terms of its push for environmental sustainability being very clean. And also Kenya is actually up there leading too. And you can also see some of these things going along in West Africa where there's certain areas that are pushing for their own kind of self-independence. Like Burkina Faso, I think that country is doing a bunch of great things. I think they're doing, I guess they're breaking up their chains.
It's less than 2 years, like since they had their new general, I can't remember his name, less than 2 years now, and they have been coming the central of the talk. They are doing really good things. So you realize Africa, it's not about having resources. We are endowed with the resources. We are endowed with good people. But the problem lies in those we put to power, starting from my own country.
I definitely agree. Yeah, leadership is definitely something to address when it comes to the governance and ensuring that there's transparency and progress and growth. And kind of shifting now to what you were mentioning in terms of the youth and kind of the next generation that's going to be pushing for the revolution and revitalizing kind of the aspect of governance. The youth, I think, are shaping Africa's future. Even though it's something that can be applied across the whole world in any region, but I think with Africa's growing population, we are projected and actually are having the highest population growth when it comes to the youth, and actually specifically youth and women make up the backbone of the continent's population. You can't be giving birth without women. There's no way. You need both men and women. And I think they're often left out of that critical decision-making spaces. There's an article actually that was written by, I think, Fatmata Lovita Sessa. I think it was published on the UNDP somewhere. And she's a resident representative in Rwanda. And she recently argued that excluding youth from governance sacrifices the continent's greatest source of innovation and energy. Hussein, what are your thoughts on this? How can Africa empower its youth to take on leadership roles?
Well, maybe I could just speak from the perspective of my own countries. I've had an opportunity to interact with people from different countries, but I haven't had enough, opportunity to just comment from them. So from my country, Kenya, I think we have a real wake-up call. And yes, we are really waking up. And I appreciate the fact that youth are now taking it into their own hands. They are not waiting for the older generation, you call it boomers or whatnot, to give them. And I feel like, you see, when you talk of a marginalized group like youth, it's a sort of a forgotten thing. It's a sort of an excluded group. I think it kind of doesn't resonate when you wait for your oppressor to just wake up in the morning and tell you, yeah, you can have this. And you will remember when we had the July protest, which was properly antagonized by the government and the elder people. It looked like we want to breed genocide or whatnot. You see, those are the things. Those are the discussions. Those are the actions that the youth needs to start taking. I was telling someone, we were having a conversation about governance and leadership. What we are enjoying right now, like the 2010 promulgated constitution, is actually a product of the youth of the age agitating for new revolutions, for new policies, for new laws. And that's what we are enjoying right now. Right now, we go all over and saying, it's my right, it's my constitutional right. But it just seems, it's not like we woke up in the morning and had that constitution. It's something that's, has been, something that has been progressing over years with young people who felt like we needed much more, agitated for those changes. And at long last, they got those changes. But you see, you don't stay always young. Over time, you age. And I feel like one of the things that we need to start embracing is to know when to leave the stage. Professor Lumumba again said, a good dancer must know when to leave the stage. And with this, allow me to slightly touch base with the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, which, right now is doing his own African Union campaign.
Yeah, we'll talk about him a little later.
So you see, that guy has really bred a lot of constitutional, leadership, progressive change, a lot of economic reforms, a lot of, leadership and constitutional reforms in terms of what we're enjoying as a Kenya right now. Has lost trust in so many Kenyans because of a very slight mistake, which I feel it ought to have realized it earlier. The art of knowing when to leave the stage. I really concur that guy, we have to analyze all the people who's been in the political space. Raila Odinga carries the day. He's fought the battle very well in terms of, revolutionizing and, breeding these new constitutional changes. But you see, right now, he's lost the trust from people. So I feel like vijana in Kenya, they are really trying. And I call them to, more and more of them to just wake up and, take up the role of leadership. It's there to be taken. It's up there to be grabbed. And just like I said the other day, leadership begins with you and me at a personal level. You begin to agitate for those small things that you feel they're not done right. That's now the way towards, achieving the biggest policy making in terms of now the whole aspect of governance.
You mentioned about the movements in the Kenya protests against tax hikes, which definitely show that youth are already leading from the ground up. And I think that it's definitely caused a reaction from the government to these movements to now proactively understand how they have to engage young leaders and integrate their perspectives into policy makings. And another aspect that I would definitely say from my perspective, it's that I think that governments need to create platforms for youth engagement. There's platforms. I know you're part of these, like youth councils and participating in budget processes to ensure that young people have a voice within the governance. But another aspect too that I think that is always forgotten within the African continent, and I don't know about this in Kenya, but definitely it's going on because there's a femicide going on. Gender inclusion is equally important as well. There's a recent study, I think, across 37 African countries found that gender political inclusion significantly enhanced their financial inclusion. So that's something that also needs to be addressed. And it's not only male youth, it's also women youth that are part of this whole push and this whole fight. So why do you think that gender inclusion has such a direct impact on economic empowerment? And what can a government like Kenya do to build on this momentum?
We all endowed differently. So we talk of gender inclusion. I mean, I'm endowed in my own ways, so I bring what I'm endowed with. I bring what I'm blessed with to the table. I have a lady, counterpart endowed in her own way. So if we, work in that kind of way of including, bringing everybody to the table in terms of, developing these policies, then we come up with a whole set of inclusive policies that touch base, that don't leave anyone outside. They don't leave anyone behind. Gender inclusion is one of the most important things, and I appreciate that my country is really doing very well in terms of gender inclusion. From Kenya, I think is really trying in terms of, even in youth participation in policy making and leadership, and a number of workshops and seminars that I've attended. Kenya is really doing good. And I feel that's one of the ways towards achieving the greatest policies that will enable our country to move forward. The moment you bring everybody to the table, the moment you include everybody and everybody has a say, everybody partakes to the policy development, then now we come up with policies that, favors everybody, because everybody was on the table. Everybody participated in making those policies, and now nobody is left to, say I wasn't there, and those kind of things. So gender inclusion is very important in terms of, coming up with policies that are really progressive.
Yeah, before we shift into our next part is to reiterate that I think it's something I think gender inclusion leads to more equitable distribution of resources and better decision making. Some might disagree to that. I've had a guest on here who's definitely against, I guess, having women participate in politics because they feel as if they only belong in the kitchen. But it's their own opinion, and I can't I can't. This is it's just them. But in terms of the proper way to actually function within, I think, a society and a cohesive and cohabitate is to actually have inclusion of all these things because it provides a more equitable distribution of resources. And I think governments such as Kenya have definitely made push on this. They can definitely improve these policies by maybe including things like quotas for participation in parliament, support things like women-led businesses, and even ensure equal access to education and healthcare to foster greater gender inclusion. If you look at Ethiopia, maternal healthcare utilization, rural versus urban, there's a big disparity in people having access to going to a hospital when they're giving birth, which might impact the birth rates and might increase or impact the death rates up or down. You never know. And those things are very important to consider and vital to address because it pivots now to this next part I want us to talk about. Unlocking capital. I think unlocking capital for Africa's growth, and I think attracting capital to Africa, I will always be a big advocate for that. I will never say no, don't invest your money there because we want. No, I will always say we should always increase and attract capital. Might believe that I actually do believe that Africa's currencies should be stronger than what they are right now, especially Kenya's currency. There was a time this year where it was atrocious. And I think the continent faces significant challenges in this area from a lack of reliable data to fragmented capital markets. There is a lot of work, though, that has been done on this in collecting data across the whole region. There's a nonprofit, I think, that's in Ghana, and I think there's other nonprofits across the continent and other organizations that are really making a push on ensuring that there is sustainable data for this, because with data, I think now Africa can unleash its attraction for capital growth. So Hussein, why do you think these issues are persistent right now in terms of data collection? How can we ensure that there's consistent data collection within our African and specifically Kenyan governments and institutions to address them?
Here's a challenge, and apparently every single challenge links us back to the theft that is happening in my country. Because see, it's not like that information isn't there or cannot be provided, but just like they say, and I really agree, corruption starts when information is hidden. And this information perhaps is hidden on purpose, because if you can access information, I mean, right now we have so many learned youth who can, analyze data and even perhaps question, the credibilities of those data. So if that data is, provided all over, that means we'll ask much more questions than we are asking right now. You see, even the recent trend of unleashing stalled projects, not even the government that is, giving out that data. It's the youth efforts. And in most cases, it even goes to the extent of hacking government system to access that data so that we can put the questions of credibility and accountability. I was asking, well, we were in a meeting in my county, Kiambu, where we were talking about what's happening in terms of since the implementation of the devolution and the devolved governance, what have been working in Kiambu and what have not been working. I would say one of the most important things is like right now the governor is having a project of buying chickens and piglets and distributing to farmers. When that might be okay, but now, why doesn't he tell us how much he has spent on chicken and piglet so that we do the cost efficiency analysis and see if this thing is really working for us or against us? They tell you they bought 600 piglets. They never tell you how much was a piglet. They never tell you how much they spend, and you cannot access that information because it's not provided in the county government websites or even in the county government social media platform. The same with the national governments. Very crucial data is not provided. Now, when you lack that, you probably lack the basis of asking the questions of accountability. So most of this, and you realize actually, most of the efforts and even the achievements and that the milestone that we are in right now are spearheaded by non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, and individuals of goodwill to see the country transforming. So, you see, it's very easy for a civil society organization to go its own way and access data than a government which is actually mandated with the task of providing data for its citizens, giving you that information. And it really both, and one of the things that I'm really pushing myself is to see every information that is needed to be in the public agora is provided in the public so that we can properly scrutinize that information, ask the question of accountability and credibility. So I feel like it's something that is intentionally done on purpose, probably to just promote the very aspect that is holding back, is holding us back, that is corruption. And I just say it's not corruption because it lacks sanity, it lacks manners, it lacks morality. It's actually theft on an industrial scale. Everybody in Kenya, this Kisii governor, called Richard Onyonka, was saying the government doesn't even know how many children are in school right now. The government doesn't have their data. Why? Because it's so
Wait,
deliberately.
what?
Yes.
What?
And it's that a whole senator saying that. And it's so deliberately done so that these people can siphon money left, right, center. Now, having that in mind, you hear the member of
Wait,
Congress.
hold up. You said they don't know how many students are in school?
The government doesn't know how many students. You'll never find that data anywhere. Go look for
And
it.
they're talking about because Lord, okay, our bad.
Now that's the country that we're talking about. Now, here's the real issue. The member of county assembly has a bursary. Member of National Assembly has a bursary. The governor has a bursary. The women rep has a bursary. The senator has a bursary. All the 6 elective positions are given allocation to give bursary to school kids. But yet, the government doesn't know how many, it doesn't have a clear data of how many students are in school. What does that tell you? So if I have to wake up today morning and go to my member of county assembly and ask them, so how many bursary did you give to school kids? He doesn't even know how many school kids we have in his own region. And that thing is so done to siphon money left, right, center. That's why I say the problem of Kenya, and it's a real wake-up call because now it's at its own peak. We really need something needs to be done and done urgently. Otherwise, we are losing a very beautiful country. Corruption, looting, stealing, and actually, this one I'm always tempted to call it. I'm even caught between using that word. But if I have to, I think in Kenya, it's beyond stealing. It's beyond looting. Right now, it's what we call
What's the word? What's the word?
just right at a different level. I mean, Kenyans, we are stealing too much, man.
You know, that's wow. That is disturbing to hear that there's a whole representative that does not know the number of students that
That's only in education sector. If you went into the health sector, you still have the same problem. If you went into the other day, you heard of the minister for health saying, she doesn't even know what is what and what is not what. I remember at one time I was taking some services from the registrar of lands and they were telling me, hata tujui kitu venye inawaka, tumeanza tu kuitumia juzi. I imagine someone telling you that, they have moved the system to an e-citizen that they don't even know how to operate, and they're supposed to give you services, and you're paying for those services. What does that tell you?
that tells me why there was an article recently that was published to where Kenya is being investigated on this whole aspect of the pay now and then you get your services later. I don't think that's how it works,
Thank you.
And going back to the scarcity of reliable data, I think, drives due diligence costs and compliance risks assessments, discouraging. I think that discourages investors as well. And I think governments, especially like Kenya, can incentivize better data collection, especially you should know how many students you have in your schools. And I think reporting this to people is very important as well, especially to the citizens, because it builds their confidence and they can trust you and have that transparency and accountability. And I think governments like that need to establish, well, for me, I was going to say, what was you going to say?
How do you want the government to incentivize such data when we have schools in Bomet that receives bursaries and allocation of funds and they don't exist? Why do you want government to give you that data when there are schools which are given allocation of funds and they don't exist?
That is, wow, that's fascinating. That is like a, what the hell?
It's like a horror movie. That's what is happening.
That is crazy. I'm more, when I'm thinking about unlocking Africa's capital growth, I'm thinking about like market data aggregation and reporting entities and offering subsidies or investment incentives for data collection and partner with firms that specialize in data collection. And I think this would help in reducing the costs associated with the due diligence and improve the accuracy of risk assessments. But before we even get to that, I think that's what you just said is something that needs to be addressed. What the heck? There is no way that data should not be available. And then apparently, well, okay, that to me is just, that's absurd. And I think capital markets in Africa are characterized by low liquidity. And I think that is also characterized as such things like that, to where you having capital provided to non-existent things. And there's an inadequate regulatory framework and a dominance of like institutions and banks rather than diversified financial instruments. And in terms of now, since we've mentioned this, what structural reforms are needed to create more dynamic and inclusive data collection as well as capital markets?
Well, if you talk of reforms in terms of policies, we already have policies. We have enough. Kenya has the best policies, I think, globally in place in papers as laws. The issue is the implementation of those policies, which again calls for that aspect of goodwill, which begins from the very core of governance and good leadership. So if we talk of policies and the availability of good laws, Kenya has ones, I'm telling you. I normally, I interact with them on a day-to-day basis, and I'm actually talking of the data collection policies and whatnot. We have good policies on data collections. That thing is just done deliberately because, you see, Tex, if I give you $100 and you have to come up with a list of what you shop with that $100, then I can backtrack on how you spend that $100 even without you telling me, right? But if you don't do that, I probably need you to explain to me. And that's why the control of budget has to go every other county, sit with the executive and the county assembly. I was in Embu recently. The control of budget found that there were medicine. Apparently, Embu Level 5 is the biggest hospital in Embu County, but it's not operating. As we are speaking right now, it's a whole issue. In fact, it made the president being booed in an incident that he recently had in Embu County. Now,
yeah, I saw that they walked off. They walked off on him.
Exactly. The control of budgets went in Embu, and Embu County had bought medicines that apparently expired in store. Why are medicines expiring in store when patients are crying that there are no medicines in hospital? Your guess is as good as mine.
What it sounds to me is that there needs to be a reform on strengthening the regulatory frameworks and structures in place to enhance transparency and disclosure standards, which I think will improve infrastructure. I'm not an expert on this, and I don't think we're the solution people, but I think by addressing those things and pinpointing that's a good starting point right now in terms of ensuring something like that can be addressed and to ensure that for future aspects, the diaspora can be mobilized through targeted vehicles, such as ensuring that there is funneling of growth in transparency and accountability. And I think by creating platforms to facilitate these types of remittance and other forms of support, they can also engage with other diaspora communities to understand their investment preferences and create policies that encourage their participation. Now, I remember earlier you had mentioned about Raila Odinga, and I know he's making his bid for the AU. So, what's your thoughts on this? So, I know you are a big guy on him, and what's your thoughts on this right now? What is his role? Well, actually, what I want to know is Kenya is really making headlines for this, in terms of the African Union Commission chairpersonship. And this campaign is very powerful of how African leadership can influence governance and development on a continent level. So what does Raila's candidacy mean for Kenya and Africa, and how could his leadership shape the AU's priorities in governance, security, and development?
Well, I I think, I mean, Raila, he has a proven track record of being a progressive and a revolutionary leader. Nobody conflicts that. I think he's tried his best in terms of bringing, legal reforms, electoral reforms, constitutional reforms. Actually, I was reading an article the other day. Nobody has brought electoral reforms like Raila has in this country. He has brought economic reforms, and yeah, he's played his part internally as insofar as Kenya is concerned. Now, coming to the African Union chairmanship, most Kenyans, just like I earlier said, he's lost trust in most Kenyans for the reason that he really failed to realize as to when to exit the stage. But now talking of him as the chairman, and I really wish him very well. I had his debate yesterday vis-a-vis his opponent from Djibouti and the other one from Madagascar. Checked through the points there, and he was talking with 80%. Oh man, sorry. He was topping with 80% poll. So I really wish him well, and I really hope that his proven track record of progressive and revolutionary leader within this country will now translate into the larger, African continent. Maybe with that we can see some, economic reforms in terms of, African domineering the economic market, just like you said. When you check at inter-European trade, it's 80%. You check at inter-Asian trade, it's at 60%. But in Africa, it's only at 20%. That means Africa as a continent is trading much more with the outside world than with itself, and that puts Africa at a risk of losing much more than it gains. I really wish he could transform if at all he wins that seat, and I wish him well. From a patriotic point of view, I wouldn't want him not to win because he's invested much in it. I really wish him well. I wish he bags the seat, and I really, really pray that he transforms. He moves the transformation and revolutionary that he has transformed Kenya into the continent of Africa. So it's a really good thing for Kenya and Kenyans at large, in as much as we were swayed by emotions because of him, giving some men to the government. Apparently, I feel like it's a very bad idea, especially after the Gen Z movement and some, bloodshed on the street. I feel like Raila shouldn't have done that. But in terms of analyzing Raila as a whole package, he has a proven track record of being a progressive and a revolutionary leader. So wish him the very best, and I think and wish to transform that into seeing the whole continent of Africa moving forward.
Yeah, I think Raila Odinga's candidacy highlights Kenya's commitment to regional integration and its desire to play a leading role in African affairs. And I think his leadership could focus on strengthening the AU's governance structure, enhancing the regional security cooperation, and promoting economic development initiatives like the African Free Continental Trade. And one last thing I think I was just thinking about, as you mentioned, he maybe should have stepped away and exited the stage. I think that should be the case for a lot of these politicians and leaders. There should be a retirement age. As you know how somebody who has worked, they have a retirement age. They should have, once you hit 65 or something, hey, Leave it to the people who are 65 and under. But once you hit 65, get out. I think that should be something that's implemented to ensure that there is no more like redundancy or going back to old ways. It's just always something that is new and innovative to ensure there's constant growth and progress. Because I think when there's constant stagnation of having the same people over and over, it doesn't lead to any progress. It's like having a fixed mindset. You don't have that growth mindset on a large scale. So that's just kind of my little tangent there about leaders and stuff. But I definitely think his push for his candidacy is good.
It's probably the idea that you were just saying the other day. We must be really willing to let go of the status quo. And I feel like that's what should happen in Kenya. We must be really, really willing to let go of the status quo and be accommodative of the new young ideologies that are coming into play. Just said of, we need a retirement age. Reminded me of, around 2022 when I was campaigning. We were in the very same ballot with a man aging 65 years old. And I remember we were at a debate and the interviewer asked him, don't you think it's not even a wise idea to compete with someone the age of your grandchild? Because sincerely speaking, that person is bringing to the table new ideologies. That person is vibrant, young, fresh from school. So, in terms of experience, at least the old generation could guide the new generation and, blending them. But now in terms of, implementation and do the actual job, I don't know, but I feel like 50 years is good for them to just go home. We have new young energy. We have enough, a lot new young energy that needs to bring the ideologies into play. And if we don't act that as soon as we should, then it's going to mess us big time.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to your 2027 campaign run. So thank you, Hussein, thank you so much for your powerful insights and inspiring us to think critically about Africa's challenges and opportunities. And to all our listeners out there, viewers, Africa's future is a global concern, one that requires collaboration, innovation, and commitment to equity. So let's continue having these conversations, share ideas, take action to support a brighter future for the continent, for your country. Don't forget to subscribe to the Open Exchange for more episodes that explore the big ideas shaping our world and yourself and your community. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and let's build a better tomorrow. Pursue your dream, seize the day. Peace.